No tank top today, but we still need to talk about some efficiency. That is right, everyone. We are here back in the class once again to talk about efficiency. More specifically, the efficiency of this pack. Because if you're like me, the second you saw it, you were like, oh, that's $20 for a bunch of hot garbage. But digging further into the pack, I think there's a lot more to this than actually meets the eye. Didn't mean to go full Optimus Prime on you guys. But overall, when we're taking into account what this pack is worth, we need to analyze two things pretty well. Number one, we need to see if the characters within themselves actually have any viability to begin with. And then once we've done that, we're going to go ahead and open up a previous spreadsheet that some of you might recognize from the last time Lightspeed bundles came out, and we can start to compare some of the more expensive parts that come into play when gearing up these characters to see, okay, even if the characters are good, is this pack really getting me there at a good pace? So again, before we go into the overall data, let's check out the characters and see what they can actually do. Now overall, I won't lie, these characters are not just like the most amazing, most versatile characters out there, similar to or unlike Gas and Padme that were in the last packs. However, I think they're going to come into form right now more than ever, specifically because of the raid, which is going to be a major consideration when we look at whether this pack is going to be right for you or not. So Qui-Gon Jinn is included in the pack, and it's really not up for debate that much whether or not he's a good character. He is used in a lot of really good squads in GAC, mostly in part to his GAC Omicron. He's very accessible from an early point, as are most of the important members of his team, like Jedi Anakin and Mace Windu. So it seems like kind of a shoo-in. Really, the only problem with Qui-Gon Jinn being in this pack is the fact that he's so good, and he's required for Jedi Master Kenobi, that it's very likely that everybody either has him already at Relic 3 or even Relic 5 because of those things, meaning the value of the pack might go down a little bit, but that needed to be said for anyone who doesn't. Now, the next two characters we need to look at are Luminara and Kit Fisto. And I'll be frank, these characters right now, pretending the raid doesn't exist, are awful. I have found some interesting uses for Luminara with her Omicron, but overall, it's not something that I would recommend to the masses just because it's very niche in how it can be used. And Kit Fisto is just hard garbage. I mean, he has a mission in Rote, but even then, you don't need to have that mission done. Most guilds end up completing those first 3 stars just by deploy alone. You're much better off investing in a better character that isn't specifically for that mission, that doesn't even reward get 2 or get 3 or anything like that. So overall, these characters really aren't worth anything. However, for the raid, they are going to be very important characters. We're going to keep talking about this a little bit more even with Eeth Koth, but overall, a huge chunk of the raid was specifically built around Luminara. When, again, we talked about this in our previous video. This specific line here, if the ally in the leader slot is a healer, which pretty much can only be Luminara or maybe Jedi Consular in some weird instances, you get all of these bonuses. Furthermore, you get more bonuses when you have healing over time and potency up. The only real duo that will be able to do that with the Jedi are going to be Luminara as well as Kit Fisto on the same team. So we're going to want to use them. And the other issue with not wanting to use them at all is that you essentially run out of 5 teams really, really quickly. There's only about 30 characters allowed in this raid total, meaning that you only can really leave 5 by the wayside, and considering most people don't have Gungans or other premium characters like Ki-Adi-Mundi or Queen Amidala, you might end up using these characters almost regardless, even if they're at gear 11 or gear 12, because you just don't have anything else to use because there are too many premium characters for the raid, meaning that if your guild is going to want to push this and you're going to want to push this raid, you really need to have these guys at least Relic 3 or Relic 5 to be able to participate. Now again, that's going to be a major consideration at the end of the video. Next up is going to be Plo Koon's viability. Plo Koon actually is not terrible. He has the magic tag combination of Galactic Republic and Jedi, as well as tank, which does give him some viability under both Starkiller and Basel lead, because he immediately taunts because of the surrounding kits around him. Now, in addition to that, where most of his value is packed, and we have to really nuance this, is going to be in his ship. And believe it or not, the high relic levels at relic 7 or relic 8 actually do change counters. Specifically, it opens up Galactic Republic to beating Executor at a very high win rate. The reason why this is necessary is because the ship has to reach a certain speed threshold to outspeed Executor. Once you can do that, you can apply Taunt over to Marauder, or actually several other options, and make sure that Jedi Knight Anakin doesn't eat the initial AoE. So it can be something very good for your overall fleet purposes, and I think he might even be a platoon somewhere. That might apply to several of these characters, actually. But overall, Plo Koon actually does hold a lot of really good value at relics. The only issue is, if you want to have him be at full use in fleet, you really do need to take him up to R7 to be able to outspeed some of those Executors. So that kind of needs to be said. And last and very much least is going to be Eeth Koth. Eeth Koth is really the hardest one to give any type of value towards. I really would stand by all the statements that I said with the first three characters, or Qui-Gon Jinn's a good character in a wreck. These two are going to be really needed for the raid. Plo Koon's an amazing pilot. But man, Eeth Koth, even with your characters being so limited for the upcoming raid, I don't know if he's going to have any time to shine at all. The one thing that he does have going for him is the fact that he has the support class. And the reason why that's important, it's important for two reasons. Number one, it's important for PvP, because that means if you so choose to, you can put him in a Gidme team, aka you use Padme lead along with Moff Gideon. I realize not every roster is going to be able to do this, but it is a fun trick, because how this works is Moff Gideon will give the entire team a bunch of protection up, and if they are a support ally, that protection up will be converted into courage, and Eeth Koth will actually be able to one-shot some really strong characters. This is a popular strategy against Trey and Savage. I've actually done this myself with Eeth Koth. That's actually why my Eeth Koth is Relic 3 right now. It's very niche counter because almost nobody puts Trey on defense, but at the same time, I guess it's something. The other use where Eeth Koth, I think, is going to shine just a little bit, and again, this is very niche. Very few people are going to actually be able to take advantage of it, at least as far as buying the pack and utilizing this. If you have Ki-Adi-Mundi does this really cool thing where both inside of the raid and outside of the raid, Galactic Republic Jedi allies with a support or healer role have an additional offense equal to 10% of their max health. So if you're going to be putting both of them on a team together, like I myself probably very much will, Eeth Koth's damage might not be that bad. His offense still sucks in general, but if he's getting to utilize his overall health pool to do even more damage, that is something. And I know what you're thinking, all right, Calvin, that actually isn't really all that much, because at the end of the day, Eeth Koth's health pool is still embarrassingly low. Well, the one thing that they are doing with the raid that is very cool is they are going to be giving all of the support Jedi 50% extra health, both here, and then I believe it happens again in one of the modifiers later on. So if you have Eeth Koth with 100% extra max health, which I guess that within itself really isn't that helpful, but if he's getting to deal damage on top of that because you partner with him with Cam, he actually might end up in one of the ideal final 5 teams. Now again, this is more nuanced because this requires you to have Ki-Adi-Mundi. This requires you to want to go to greater lengths in the raid, so it's not going to fit everyone. I felt like it was necessary to give some arguments for that character. So now that we've kind of established what these 5 characters can do and how they're not all totally worthless, I get Eeth Koth being the closest to being worthless, we need to see how much value actually is in the pack. Is it giving us a good bang for our buck despite where the characters are? And the answer is kind of. When we look at the overall pack, the two things that I really want to analyze is how many Chirotech and how much signal data are you getting for free? And the reason why we analyze specifically those two things is because they have a tendency to be bottlenecks. I know plenty of people out there who are stuck on 5 different projects because Chirotech are holding them back on every single one. I myself, most of my projects right now are being consistently held behind because of signal data. And getting free signal data on a character that you would have otherwise had to gear up, or maybe you didn't want to gear up in the first place, is really nice and does actually have tangible monetary value. So how we have this set up right now is we are comparing the new Jedi pack to the previous packs that came out not too long ago for 3PO or Geonosians, Night Sister, as well as Padme. And overall, you can see from the final numbers here, it does stack up really well to both the Geonosian as well as the Ewok pack. It doesn't have quite the value that Padme or Night Sisters had, just because, number one, I believe those characters are more universal, but even from a price perspective, you were getting more bang for your buck because Padme had more characters at Relic 5, and while Night Sisters, I believe, were all at Relic 3, they still had more characters that were being put into the pack, pushing it to higher value, and actually was even cheaper than the current Jedi pack. But walking through this a little bit, you're getting 500 Kyrotic for free, assuming you don't have any of these characters at Gear 13, and that Kyrotic, if you were to go and buy that in shipments, that would cost you 14,000 crystals, equating to about $89 or so. Now, in a very similar sense, this would cost you 14,000 crystals if you wanted to buy the amount of signal data that is required to get these characters going. And that's to me, that's a really big deal, because when we look at the actual signal data needed to take 5 characters to Relic 5, regardless of who they are, it's a lot. It's 775 individual pieces, which again, if you were to have to go and buy those through shipments because you've already maxed out all your farming, it would cost you $91, meaning that the overall pack, looks like I hit it here, is worth about $180 in total, meaning if you're paying $24 and you can actually use these characters, it's about a 9 times better value. So again, not crazy, but also really not terrible. And ultimately, what I believe our conclusion is going to be here, if whether or not you should buy the pack, is number one, are you a spender? Are you someone who regularly buys packs in the game? Probably even ones that are of higher value, like the Conquest Pass. If the answer to that is yes, the next question needs to be, are you going to push the raid at all? And I know there are some guilds out there that aren't even going to be attempting it, but if your guild is going after it and they want you to push for a good score, I really would recommend this pack, because it's $20 to be able to get both Luminara, Eeth Koth, as well as Kit Fisto, all to Relic 5, and I'm fairly certain at least 2 of the 3 will be used in some of the better squads. And then if you can get Plo Koon up to Relic 5 as a bonus, I realize he can be used in the raid, although he probably won't be all that great. His ship is going to retain value even once this raid is finally over. So that is overall our analysis. The pack, again, it's not the best one ever. It's not even the best. It's not even on the upper tier of the Lightspeed bundles. But if we're comparing it to all the other things that we could get in game outside of Lightspeed bundles, it still does hold a lot of value, particularly if you are going to go after the raid, because it's essentially giving you one of the teams that you probably already have, but you would just be using Gear 12. So thank you guys for watching, and as always, stay awesome.